All right, we'd like to welcome you to the Zion in Mind podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Johnson, the CEO and founder of Temple in Mind. To my right is James Kemp, and if you want to introduce yourself.
I run a company called Genesis 3D with my son and son-in-laws, and we basically make things possible from impossible.
That's true.
3D printing, technology, scanning, etc. So,
and then to my left here, we have Sean Wilson with WK Wilson. If you want to talk about what you do, and
I'm supposed to follow up. He makes the possible out of impossible.
You do too. You do too. You do too.
I'm a creator of wooden stuff, laser cut stuff, designer from forever and forever. So
he says stuff, man. You got to see these plaques. We're going to show them on the show here, but these are beautiful plaques, as well as you got to talk about the bow ties because you're rocking one right now.
Yeah, this is a one of a kind. Just so you know, I like it. Therefore, I'm keeping it. I'm not going to make any more. But
okay, so you won't get this one. You won't give it to anyone.
No, this one's mine now. So it's laser cut, but it's my creations, my designs. The gears move, so when I get nervous doing this thing that we're doing, I
start
sit
moving.
Sit and play with my.
So he's got this little fidget spinner in his neck, basically, right?
It's adult fidget spinner.
So
which sounds good,
for
but
all
doesn't
those,
sound good at the same time.
Does it tighten it?
That's the next thing we're going to do.
He's going to tighten the neck tie up.
Come here, kid.
For those that can't see what we're looking at here, we've got this really cool wooden neck bow tie that actually has gears in it. Let me look at that real quick. We've got, it's not flowers. What would you call that?
Well, it's got a Victorian.
A Victorian,
Victorian
and
design going on.
The center leaves, or not, I don't think it's a flower, right? Is it a flower?
It's kind of a flower, but it's a Victorian kind of
But
design.
it is controlling 3 gears. So you have a main gear that's controlling the 2 sides gears that spin.
And this this one's made out. It's got that maple, that front on this maple, and then walnut, and then we got acrylic in here, and I got a page from something in back here. It's
my favorite
all kinds of stuff.
My favorite thing about WK Wilson product in general is they're actually put in these beautiful boxes, these wooden boxes. And so we display them in the store outside of their boxes, but usually we sell the ones that are down in the cabinet. And when we do that, I like to take it out, put it to the counter and at the register, and then I pop it open, and it still has that fresh burnt wood smell that pops
part
from
of the
it.
value of it. That's
and
for
I
sure,
kind of hold it to the customer, and they're like, "Ooh,
just get that aroma going."
It's really nice. So I wanted to kind of introduce who we are, what we're doing, and kind of the purpose of the podcast. It's a lot more than us just putting a company together, 3 different companies, actually 4 technically if you're talking about the production side of things. But our goal here is to actually create something within our podcast that's giving back. It's something that we hope that will grow and evolve into something a lot bigger. If I was to put a category on this particular podcast, I would look more towards the self-help. Even though that we're in a religious store in nature, I kind of wanted to highlight a little bit about that and how do we want to talk about our faith. And we're just kind of, letting this flow, right? But before I do that, let's just go back over here to James and talk about Genesis 3D and how that's developed and exactly the details in that.
Yeah, we basically, the reason we chose the name Genesis 3D is it basically allows us to create things out of nothing.
I love that. I love that.
We have a scanner that we can scan items, and then we turn them into 3D CAD programs, and then from there we print them on our various printers. We have 4 or 5 different types of printers that we can use. We have very, very detailed resin-based kind of things that they use to do teeth. We also have printers that can print really anything. I mean, if you think about it, we print temples and a lot of temple related items.
And that's how we met, right?
Yeah.
So I had a cart, a small little kiosk over here by Santa Claus over last Christmas. And James came up to me, and it was kind of put his arm around me, just from the beginning. It was just we just hit it off. And I repeat, do you remember what you said to me about meeting?
Yeah, I
loved it.
I believe that there are no coincidences. And I'm not trying to steal that from any religious leaders locally or whatever, but I believe that we meet the people we're supposed to meet. And it was funny, my wife and I were just walking through the mall. We had finished our shopping, and we were just kind of, milling around, looking at any final things we wanted to do. And I saw that I noticed the printer going.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
We just had one.
He's doing 3D printing stuff over there.
And it wasn't very impressive.
So I went over and talked to him, and I didn't say that at the time, but I was like, we can do a lot better stuff than this.
It's true. It's true. No, I want to leave.
You sold that.
We did. We did really well.
So even in that state.
And we were only doing night lights, just little plug-in night lights. And honestly, when I first got the first render from Johan, your son-in-law, right? Mm-hmm. I was like, oh my gosh, these are the people I need to. Yeah. Actually, what happened is you handed me a resin bird, and it was just the top portion, like a bust of a bird, and it was in resin, and it was gorgeous. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I needed, because I really struggle in the organics and in the spherical shapes, and I can do more structural stuff, but even then, it takes me a year to even have something come together. So, and since we've come together and opened up this store, we now have, I think, over we have 6 different temples, or 5. We have 5 temples right now, but we have them in several different versions. We have them in just even a light switch little cover.
Light cover, yeah.
We have the plug-in night lights. We also have ornaments for Christmas that can be custom. We have 3D temples. But what really excites me about Genesis is kind of this mentality that things that aren't there, but they're first created in your mind, and then they actually become physical. And we know within our faith, there's different scriptures that talk about that. But the name Genesis kind of fits perfectly with that. And so things that aren't quite there, but in your mind, and then they can physically be in your hand. And that's something that's powerful about 3D printing, is you'll have an idea, and I've done it a few times, not obviously to the level that you guys have, and then like in an hour or 2, or however long the print takes, you'll have it in your hand. And so it's crazy. It's crazy to think.
Most of my career has been in the corporate world. And so I would work all day, and then I'd come home. My wife would say, "How was your day?" "Well, I was busy. I went to a bunch of meetings and stuff."
Yeah.
But now we can go down to our print lab, and we can see all these things that printed overnight.
Yeah.
And we're like, "Oh, wow, that turned out really well." And, and it's really cool to be able to sit down and say, you know what if we did this? And then within a matter of hours, we have it holding it in our hand. It's really exciting, really cool opportunity.
So when your wife says, "What did you do today?" You're like,
"Yeah, you can hand it to her.
I can hold it up.
What do you think about that?"
She sometimes she's like, "Oh, that's really cool." And sometimes
"What'd you make me?"
Like, yeah. And sometimes she's like, "Well, that's not very cool, but okay."
Right. Yeah.
All right, so Sean, let's talk more a little bit about your plaques. We talked a little bit about your wooden bow ties, and you guys have got to go to these 2 websites, by the way, wkwilson.com.
It's actually wk-wilson.
Oh, man, thank you. So one more time, sorry.
wk-wilson.
All right, and then I want to make sure we get this right. Genesis3.net.
.net, yes.
Yeah. And of course, I'm templeandmind.com, and then we're also starting to build noizentertainment.com. So, but back to Sean here. So let's
and we're 3 separate individuals, but we're kind of working
under
on
one
this
roof,
together.
right?
Yeah.
3 separate individuals under one roof.
We're arm in arm, and we jumped off the cliff.
Kicking and
but we're here
screaming all the way down.
We're here at the University Place Mall, and if you guys have a chance to stop by, you can see we're doing the podcast, and where we're going to start talking about different things that are important to us. And before I go into that, I just want to highlight one more time on these plaques real quick for Sean.
So he kind of created he gave you the genesis of his company.
Yes. Yes, that's where I was going. Yeah, perfect.
So I actually started making wooden bow ties because a very dear friend of mine was the bow tie guy.
And he's actually in the logo, isn't he? Isn't that him?
That's yeah. So,
yes, I got that the other day.
The logo was okayed by him and his family, and we
because you had a picture of him. What was his name?
Max Moser.
Okay.
The curly mustache.
Yeah. So that's in your
fedora.
logo. That is so cool.
Show up to church, and he was rocking it every time.
Was he like a mentor to you, or
you
like an apprentice for him, or?
No, he was the mentor. He was there. You get some of those people who they don't teach. They don't stand up in class. They don't tell you these things, but they teach you.
Yeah.
Over and over again. And I remember being sick and not getting up for church or whatever, and finding out the next week that he was sicker than a dog, and he was there because it was important to him. And a couple times he just really, where I was like ready to just give up on everything, he was there and just just kind of like, good job.
So did
You're
he
doing all right.
use the actual designing of wood ties and stuff like to incorporate into? Did he use it like
Did
somehow
he use
to?
it? What do you
No,
mean?
I mean, did he like use that to work with you and coach you somehow?
Oh, no,
or use
no,
it
it
as a
was-
tool, or that was just something you took on?
So he was the bow tie guy. So it's 500, 600 bow ties that he had. And for his 90th birthday, he was bringing out all his funky bow ties. And these are not normal bow ties. These are funky bow ties. So it's like we came up with the idea of wooden bow tie. He doesn't have a wooden bow tie. And then we figured we were the only ones crazy enough to do a wooden bow tie.
Okay.
But because we have the internet, we find out there's other crazy people in the world as well. So we made wooden bow ties.
Well,
for him.
I'm going to cut you off. It's not crazy. It's definitely a niche.
Oh my goodness, it's a
and
niche,
and
but
it's
there are
huge.
yeah, there's
You
there's
got to
different
check this out.
different
because
places in the world that this is a thing.
I love Sean, but he really undersells himself. I'm telling you, these things are amazing. In fact, my father, who's probably listening to this podcast, I don't even think he would even attempt to try and wear a bow tie. I don't think I've ever seen him in a bow tie.
Right.
Our grand opening, he comes walking through our front doors with a wooden bow tie that
Right.
you gave to him.
Yeah.
And he was rocking it.
Yeah.
And you know, there's just those people that can't wear it. Just you're like, no, you should not be wearing that. And he's definitely one of those guys. But when he came through the store, I was like, whoa,
It's
okay.
an attitude. What do you know? First of all, when you wear a bow tie, you got it.
Well, the
There's an
design of
attitude.
them are really neat.
But
It's
to
not
get it-
just like
yeah.
a corny little
Right.
whatever.
Oh yeah, we don't. Yeah. So yeah, the first one was a little bit corny, but it was still a lot of fun, and we've just kind of evolved. And then the temple plaques became, it was always something I wanted to accomplish.
Right.
But it was, the bow ties were selling and we were growing and we had, things that we wanted to do. But COVID hit. And,
Yeah.
And it's like, I got to
There
do
was
something.
there was a period there where you were a little worried, right? Correct. With
Oh
like,
yeah, we were
to fold
it's
up
like,
shop
okay,
and be
this
done.
is how we're going to close up shop.
You were
these
ready-
were the things that needed to happen.
Yeah.
Or we're closing up shop and we're moving on. And then the temple plaques, the response, when we brought them to your kiosk,
Yeah,
just
it was phenomenal. We had them at the end cap,
crazy,
right
yeah.
where everybody could walk in, and there was
Yeah.
another art company across from us, and I would watch people go and get art there. There was more paintings, and then they'd turn around, they'd see your plaques, and it was like a beeline, just
right.
straight for the cart. And so it was really powerful for us to be able to actually have that at the end cap for us. It really helped. And then on the opposite
they're amazing.
side,
I mean, if you
Yeah.
look at them, it's not just the temple; it's the backdrop, it's the packaging. I mean,
Right.
it's amazing. I mean,
well,
it's,
and that's
it's
and
amazing. Something you definitely want to have hanging in
Yeah.
your home. And
absolutely, yeah, and that's kind of the theme of Temple in Mind in general, is just to kind of follow that Spencer W. Kimball talked about having temples in every room, and that's kind of been my motive. But I wanted to highlight back on what Sean was talking about, where just reinventing his business in general, and through a crisis found opportunity and a way to deliver, especially when temples were closing down.
Right.
And that's kind of why Temple in Mind was so important for me, was just because I knew if they were going to close down temples, then we're going to put it in your home. And then some customers have shared with me like, oh man, you're so amazing and genius because you've made all these temples white and we wear white when we go in the temples. And I'm like, well, I didn't even think that. Like, thank you. I didn't even realize, can I use that? Can I use that in my marketing? Like the temples are white, and because they're obviously can light up and show. But what I wanted to emphasize there is that each one of us has decided that we wanted to take on a theme. I want to address those themes right after this message real quick.
Today's sponsor is Genesis 3D. Too many great ideas and technological advancements have been lost to history due to lack of resources. They firmly believe in the brainpower of people and in bringing great ideas to the world. Genesis 3D has the most advanced 3D scanning, design, printing, and vacuum forming technology in the industry. Instead of providing mass production services, they are a specialty shop that focuses on the design and creation of custom products and prototypes. Their engineers can make your ideas a reality. Visit their website today at genesis3d.net. Genesis 3D, making the impossible possible.
Okay, welcome back to the Design in Mind podcast. We're here with James Kemp and Sean Wilson. James Kemp with Genesis3D.net, and Sean Wilson with I want to get this right. Please say it, would you?
Is WK-3D.net. Wilson.com.
Gosh, dang it. I'm learning.
Right.
But we were just talking about how during a pandemic, not only did Sean try to reinvent himself and figure out a new method of delivering his product, but I lost my job at the beginning of this pandemic. And it was really devastating for me because I thought I was in the career path of my dreams. I really thought that it was hard. It was very stressful. I was learning a new skill. It was 3D rendering. And I was doing 3D modeling of temples as like a little side fun project for my girls. I'd never thought that it would be something that we would sell or maybe potentially could sell, but I mean, how many temples do you have to create? And that's the headache that James is taking care of right now for me with his team, which you've got, what, 3, 4?
We have
Corey. Yeah, do you mind mentioning them on the show?
Yeah, no problem. So my son CJ is the one that he's kind of our printing expert. He understands how to use all the printers and that kind of a thing. And then my other son-in-law, Johan, he's the one that does all the designs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing. He literally has a Google Earth on one side of the screen and
spins
then
it
his CAD design program on the other side. And that's why the temples that we design are right down to the windowsill. I mean, they're
beautiful.
Yeah, they're amazing. And so he's been doing design and CAD work for years and years. And it's just, like I said, no coincidences. Here's this guy is this incredible designer that marries my daughter, and we decide to end up doing something like this. So, and then my other son-in-law, Corey, he's the one that does a lot of our media stuff, and he's the one
he's a phenomenal illustrator too.
Yeah.
He did some pieces that you're working on. I don't know if I can mention here, but they're fantastic. It's a little chessboard, and these pieces were great. And same with Sean over here. Sean started doing some storyboarding for some commercials. Like, we're starting to surround ourselves with some amazing artists and talents. Aside from the artists that we're bringing into the store, who are phenomenal, we've got some artists that make colorful temples and things like that. We're meeting some really fun people. And I would encourage anybody that's listening to the podcast, if you're close to the University Place Mall, please come and talk to me. My office is right here. You can't miss it. Walk in the front doors, you'll see me. And I want to talk to you, and maybe we could start developing some of your talents. But let's go back just a little bit, talking about pandemics and crisis and losing jobs. And I find it very interesting that trying to exercise faith or be motivated towards focusing on good things instead of losing a job and focusing on the doom and gloom. My wife and I, well, I'll give more credit to my wife than me, just kind of had some perspective towards what we should do next. And as I lost my job, we took our severance and we put it into a cart. And we went and looked and talked with them all to figure out how much one of these kiosk carts would cost. And it was within like the $100th of a dollar. It was literally for living on it for 2 months, doing this, trying to find other jobs, and I was still working as diligently as I could to try to find another job while we were developing this. And then I thought it was going to be something that she would run or whatever. And then to have it explode into this during a pandemic just really has changed my paradigm and my paradigm shift towards understanding that there are opportunities during crisis if we are innovative enough to do that. And that started a theme with me where I didn't want to be driven by fear. And I'm starting to understand that there is two people always in a race, fear and faith. And there's always going to be someone that wins. It doesn't matter. There is no control over that. It will either be fear or it will be faith. And in some cases, it'll be fear that wins. In some cases, it'll be faith. But hopefully more than not, it's more faith that wins. And so for me, I wanted to take on a theme for the podcast, and we're going to have us actually hosting different people at different times. So the 3 trio of us are going to split up and diversify just a little bit, and I want to talk about that. And so, Sean, if you wouldn't mind talking about what kind of theme that you're looking at to do on the podcast with you and your guests.
Certainly. We're kind of trying to call it the outside looking in, but I want to talk about people who don't feel like they fit into that cookie cutter, whatever it is, a corporate person or a religious person, and how you find ways to move forward, how you find faith, how you find that courage to fight against those things and do it anyway, even if it doesn't look like the world will accept you or not.
Right, and I think that's critical because like we're moving into technologies of AI and NFTs and all these different formats that are, it's going to be hitting us faster and faster and faster. And for us to be fitting into some form of a cookie cutter shape, it's not going to work anymore. In fact, there are things that are happening that are breaking the molds every day. I mean, just look at the technology and SpaceX and all these different companies and what they're doing. And so, but then also on the side of faith, there's that element of, I know there's a lot of people that are hurting or trying to figure out who they are as a person, or trying to develop all those different characteristics about themselves that doesn't fit that normal mold. We're seeing that every day. And I'm finding that you're having a lot of experiences in that and meeting different people that fit that particular mold breaking type people.
We
And-
like those people.
Yeah, we love those people, don't we?
I mean, that makes the world so much fun to be a part of.
Right. And I'm very thankful that art's not one color or 3 shades of gray, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or whatever it might be. We love the idea that there's diversity and color. And in fact, we actually have a new artist that's coming on board here very soon, and she's going to be on the podcast. And she's taking these temple pictures that are normally conventionally painted beautifully in granite colors, gray tones, browns. And she's just gone completely the opposite direction. And she's painted them in 50, 60, 70 different colors. And we're even talking about potentially doing a children's coloring book, but instead of paint by numbers, it's going to be paint by virtues. And so you'll be able to actually go to the color, see a virtue, and match it on the temple. But what she said to me that was really, and I'll bring her on the podcast. I'm going to give her a formal introduction here a little bit later. But what was really cool was that she's from South Korea. And she just talked about how all of us as God's children are all diverse and all different colors and shapes and sizes. And we are so focused on how different we are so we can stay different and separate ourselves and put ourselves in silos. And then we can position ourselves above one another, you know?
Well, and that's the thing that's interesting too, is our society is all about being normalized, right? I mean,
Right.
I have a little granddaughter who's 5, who is just the smartest, interesting little kid, and she has her own way of doing things.
You're not partial at all, obviously.
Yeah, no, not at all. It's, I don't have any biases at all towards this little one. But she, and we were talking the other night, my wife and I, we were saying, at what point does that get taken out of her? Right? Is it when they start to go to school? Is it, when they get to a certain age?
Are you talking about the innocence, or are you talking about
no,
just
the
creativity?
the
creativeness,
creative
intelligence.
being her own thing.
This is a fantastic topic,
Yeah.
because I honestly think it's puberty. I think it's at that junior high stage. And what's really interesting to me is if you look at the psychological development of children, you start to find out that it's not cool anymore to pretend. It's not cool to have a
right.
best friend. But when you really think about all the major CEOs that are out there, there are people that have had some major trauma in their life.
Yeah.
And that trauma has put them into that sphere that never went away during that puberty or adolescence time. And they kept carrying that make-believe as their escape. And they ended up becoming some of the most successful people.
Yeah. And
So
it's
to add to
sad,
that,
yeah.
you really don't want your child to lose it at all, ever.
Yeah, and then kids are in this mode where it's not cool to be noisy, it's not cool to be messy, it's not cool to be, whatever, and
you have to define yourself.
Yeah,
You have to say, this is who I am. This is exactly what group I fit in, and because there's this push, this very strong push of an agenda, and each department has its own agenda, and it's separating everyone.
Well, and I think what's interesting, you said that junior high. I think junior high is an evil experiment that someone came up with.
Nobody's arguing with that.
Let's bring everybody together. They're in this really weird emotional
Let's
state.
feed them crummy food at lunch.
Yeah, they're all growing at different grades, and let's put them all in a
puberty
building.
to it.
Yeah,
Yep.
add
Yeah.
puberty. Put them all in a building.
New smells and
have them
stuff.
spend 6, 7, 8 hours a day together. They're all uncomfortable. They're all. I mean, it's
Let's see
it's
how
part of
soon-
life.
yeah,
But
yeah.
but I think you're right. I think the fear of being unique and the fear of being your own self is kind of beaten out of you.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And then we become cogs
Well, you
in
got to
a machine.
conform. Yeah, you got to conform to the populace.
Yeah.
Or whatever. But at the same time, I'm also starting to see like people that have not fit into the popular groups are now making their own groups. But even in that situation, they're not diversifying. They're not being individuals. They're still following some sort of a format, right? But let's kind of talk a little bit about the subject that you wanted to bring to the podcast with your guests, and talk a little bit about that and why you chose this particular subject.
Yeah, I've got kind of an interesting background. I've really lived a polar life. I've been kicking around a topic for a book and all this kind of stuff, and the concept is from the ashes, and the idea is that the subtitle is how losing my job, going bankrupt, and getting divorced saved my career, my finances, and my marriage.
That's awesome.
And-
Can you say that one more time? That is really cool. If you didn't catch that on the podcast, one more time.
So it's how losing my job, going bankrupt, and getting divorced saved my career, my financial situation, and my marriage.
Now, not to cut you off, what's really interesting is, as James talks about, there's no coincidences. One of the major themes that my wife and I have experienced in our marriage is rising from the ashes. Hence the reason why the Provo City Center Town Center. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Provo City Center
Thank
Temple.
you.
There you go.
Tongue twister. One more time.
Provo City Center
Thank
Temple.
you.
Yes.
Rising from the ashes.
Yeah,
was
it
a
burned
big-
down years and years ago.
and then it comes up something better. And so as we were designing the store, we had ash as part of our theme, the stage, the piano, the table right here in the center. And then when you started talking to me about the theme that you wanted to bring, it was before you knew this was all going to be ash, which I thought was really cool. So sorry, keep going.
So all those things happened to me. I'd been in the workforce for a while, lost my job, not really anything I did, but it was just the beginning of kind of that corporate culture where it's like, hey, if you're not valuable today, then, we'll see you later. The loyalty aspect of things kind of went away. And then when you lose your job, and it was 99, so it was right before that crash of 2000 when the bubble burst and everything went south, our finances fell apart. And as a result of those things and just some other stuff that had been going on, I haven't always been the calm, normal dude you see before you now. I used to be really a temper tantrum guy. I was was not fun to be around. And so as a result of all those things, my wife and I got divorced. And the crazy thing is that we got remarried 2 years later at Disneyland with my son walking my wife up the aisle. He was 4.
You got divorced.
Yes.
And then you got remarried.
Yes.
Why?
To the same person.
To the same person.
Yeah.
So tell me, how did that go full circle back?
We actually, it started the day we signed our divorce documents.
Really?
That sounds really crazy, but we went to the courthouse or whatever, and we signed back then you would actually go to a vending machine and you'd put $20 in the vending machine and it would literally print out a no fault divorce package.
That's
so
horrible.
we went somewhere and we sat down and we were like filling
machine.
it all out. And then we turned it in and we're like, are you hungry? Let's go get some lunch.
Did you really go get lunch?
I'm dead serious. We went and got lunch.
Took all this off your shoulders and started.
Yeah, and we just started talking, and we kind of went through a courtship again, and we had 4 children that were a big part of our lives.
I wouldn't necessarily give that as marriage counsel to go through
no,
divorce
it's
in order to get back, but I think it's an very interesting story.
Sure, there's bits and pieces of it that are.
I wouldn't recommend it necessarily.
Yeah.
But I mean, and we started dating again. I mean, it was kind of this weird thing. And we really only had, we hadn't been happy for a while, but we really only had that crazy divorce, activity that you hear about, right? You hate them, they hate you, you use the kids, you use your stuff. We only had that for about 4 to 6 months, somewhere around in there.
Yeah.
And so
how long were you guys separated in total? Or
it was 2 years between the time we were divorced to the time we got remarried, and we're just as happy as can be. I mean, we haven't had any. I've lost a job since then. We've gone through different challenges and that, but we've been able to make it through it. And same with my career, same thing. I lost my job, but I found a better job, and then I lost that job and I found a better job. And so that concept of out of the ashes is basically the feeling is, or the concept is, we're never out of the game. We're never broken. We're never unredeemable, right?
It almost seems like a refiner's fire.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
which is kind of what fire does. Yeah.
we're excited to have you all listening to the show. Again, this is the Zion in Mind podcast here at Temple in Mind, at the Temple in Mind store at the University Place Mall. We've got some really cool things that are going to be coming at you. Some really amazing guests that are coming on board. They're going to be talking within these themes, as well as I have a feeling that we're going to have many more themes. They're going to come through this podcast. And obviously this is a very small footprint, but we're hoping to grow that and develop this. And so tune in next time when we start kind of going over these different pieces of our podcast. Thanks for listening.
Today's sponsor is W.K. Wilson. From wooden plaques on your wall to bow ties that you can wear, W.K. Wilson creates amazing and unique designs that captivate the eyes of any who see them. These great creations are made by laser cutting many layers of wood and fitting them all together. The wooden plaques and bow ties make a special gift for friends, newlyweds, and loved ones. Visit their website today at wk-wilson.com. W.K. Wilson, original laser cut wood designs.
All right, welcome back to the Zion in Mind podcast. That's going to take some getting used to, and this is a definitely
Zion noiZ.
Zion noiZ Entertainment that's producing this. We're working with. Should I mention? I got Caleb. Caleb's like shaking his head. We didn't introduce Caleb.
He's the man behind the curtain. He's the one that makes all this stuff real.
He's our producer in this show. Caleb, why don't you come up here and introduce yourself really fast? We got to give you a little bit of credit here. We're still developing a name. We've been kind of thinking about. Don't even mention the name. Don't mention the name. So it's still in development, but there's going to be a production company that's going to be
legal issues
in complement with Zion noiZ Entertainment, which I have.
Not incompetent.
Not incompetent.
Yes.
And
he's
not competition.
Now live. He plugged in.
He's plugging in.
How come you get the red one? Ours are black.
He's getting the red cord. That's the special cord.
So much cooler.
Narrator cord.
We are introducing team members to the Zion in Mind podcast. I've got to give credit out to Caleb for all of his efforts here and getting this all set up and what he's done for us. Are you on? Let's see here. Are you on? Caleb, he's kneeling down. He's figuring it out. We can fix this in post.
Test. Oh,
there you go. Yeah.
So, I mean, my name's Caleb.
You were so much more professional Friday when
your
you
last
were
name?
I know.
checking us out.
My name's Caleb Vanderhoff. I am the director of photography for Zion noiZ Entertainment.
Yep. Yeah. And we're developing all these little things. I mean, it was just originally started as a cart at the store or a little small kiosk. At the mall, and now we have a store, and now we're talking about production.
You know what? One thing I love about Aaron is he has a much broader vision than I have. I've always been a very conservative, very cautious, very.
That's a nice way of saying he's a dreamer.
Well, but dreamers are needed, and my son was that way. He was the one that said, "Let's go do this," and he kind of dragged me into it, and I'm so grateful for it. But so the idea of expanding and doing all these cool things like this podcast and bringing Caleb,
well,
in,
I don't want to embarrass Caleb, but I've got to give some credit out here because, we're just starting out, and I'm really going to embarrass him. Here we go, and I hope your wife's listening because I got to do a shout out to your wife, Katie. Katie she had a cart. She too had a cart, but she was over here in this other hallway that's now across from our store, and she just had a seasonal cart. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to talk about you. Where are you going? He's running away because I'm talking about him. He's getting a chair. Okay, good. So Katie had a kind of like a modest boutique that she was trying to build called Sunflower Drive, correct? And then we were able to start working on some projects together, and now we have these white dresses and clothing that we're bringing into our store here.
So you started with dresses, and now you got a production expert.
Yeah, she was out here, and I think that she was trying to figure out her side of things and developing it, and she's still developing that. But I saw a huge need that we needed for the store. But my point was, and this is the part that's going to embarrass Caleb, is Caleb's here pro bono. Caleb's full time with me. I didn't have a salary, I didn't have payroll. He's investing his time into this, and he's really believing in what we're doing here. And so I want to kind of maybe highlight real quickly why. And This is nothing to do about me. This has to do with the actual store and your
Oh, no, you're
goals and
good.
stuff. But
No worries.
why would you take such a huge leap of faith like that?
Well, I would take a huge leap of faith like that because I saw your vision, what you wanted to do. I saw how you wanted to touch the lives of many people. And that's kind of what I always wanted to do, is I've always wanted to help people, always wanted to, support myself in a way where I can grow and, I don't know, like stretch my wings and fly, basically, because I've
Develop
always...
a portfolio and...
Exactly. I mean, I've always wanted to do something in film, and I felt like I was kind of stuck in many other, odds and end jobs and just stuff I didn't really want to do. And so when Katie told me that there was an opening up for, a director of photography, and then Aaron approached me and he talked to me about that, it was just an amazing opportunity.
And it was just going to be like, I was thinking it was just like a little side hustle, like, hey, I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to develop this. And you guys just took a huge leap. And because of that, we're now able to do a lot more than we had anticipated, because we have a small little window of time to really make this successful. We've taken it's not self-sustaining. We don't have investors involved. We're not trying to do anything in debt. We don't have payroll built. I mean, we are literally in a situation of going from losing a job, taking a severance, trying to find a new job, didn't work out, building a cart, building a store, and now trying to do this massive production. And Caleb, I appreciate all of you guys for contributing your faith towards this project. And so I guess, I don't know, I don't want to cut you off. I didn't mean to cut you off or anything like that. I have a bad habit of doing that. But I just really wanted the viewers and the listeners to realize what we're trying to really do here. We're trying to create something that is in complete opposite of what we're seeing every day. We're trying to create something that is complete opposite of what we're tired of hearing. And so when you hear the word Zion Noiz, it's ZION-NOIZ. And so it's Zion in nature, and a lot of people might think that's a religious thing, but I'm thinking more towards a utopia, a place of people that believe the same way, that have not necessarily religiously even, but they do believe in a society that self-sustains and helps one another. That's the idea behind that. You don't have to be of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or you don't have to be Baptist or whatever it might be. You can have your structure and want good people doing good things for one purpose. And that's what Zion is to me. But then flipping the noise on itself. There's so much noise out there. And so the idea is that we are going to use our trumpets, or we're going to use our voice to come out here and say, no, this is Zion's message out there, and we're going to make a noise. But we're going to do it in such a way where it's going to be positive, uplifting, and reflecting on those things that we feel are of good in nature. And that's where Caleb, I think that as we've had these meetings, has just flowed really well into that, as well as you guys, as well as mentors and coaching me and helping support me, because this has been one of the hardest things I've ever done. But my background a little bit, I too have been through some major challenges. Went through a really messy divorce within the last 3 years, and my wife, I love her so much. She's a widow. Her husband passed away in 2010 in a plane crash, and she was able to rise from the ashes from that. And when we ended up meeting, I don't want to go too much into that just because we love our privacy, but it really opened my eyes that Heavenly Father and there is a supreme being, or whatever you want to call it, watching out for each one of us, because I really believe she was custom for me. Her trials and her afflictions and her things that she went through were the ingredients that I needed, and vice versa. Bringing two beautiful little girls into a relationship, she was instantly a mom, and then we have a brand new baby on top of all of that, and just this instant family, and how well she adapts. And she has been my rock, and I've never really had that. I've always had to be the one pulling. I've always had to be the one, let's get this going, let's do this, we got to try doing this. This is the first time in my life I've really felt like I have a team member. And that taught me something when I started developing relationships moving forward. And I love when people talk about defining moments in their lives, you know, where they can mark their life up to that moment. And then, of course, chapter that mark right there, moving to the future. And that is definitely her in my life, is meeting her, and the relationship that's developed made me realize these are the kind of relationships I need to build with the people I need to surround myself with. They need to be to this caliber. And that's why all three of you guys are here.
Yeah.
Can that be? I hope you guys took that as a compliment. I just compared you to my wife. Just throwing a little bromance on all three of you right there.
Well, she's much more attractive than
She's
Sean is.
way
so,
more
Cuter,
attractive.
that's for sure.
I'm sorry,
so-
Sean, but
No, there's no fight there.
No, Aaron, I think you're right. I mean, you know, if you, you know, it's going to maybe get a little bit spiritual, but we
That's okay.
We come down to this earth. We didn't come down to sit on the sidelines, right? We didn't come down to, you know, just be normal, to just be, you know, just blend in and not be a part of,
correct.
yeah,
Right.
and not make a difference in what we do with our lives, right? We come here for a purpose, and that's to learn lessons, to gain experiences, things like that. You don't learn lessons and gain experiences when you don't take any risks. And that, I was mentioning before, my son was trying to figure out what he wanted to do. He's in his early 20s. He's married and wants to figure out what he wants to do. And we kept talking about this 3D printing technology and all that kind of stuff. And I kept saying, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. You know, kind of like a dad does, right? Pat him on the head and say, oh, that's a great idea. Let's see what you want to do next week, right?
Right.
What do you want to change your major to be this week?
right.
But it didn't go away. And he kept bugging me. And he finally said, Dad, are we going to do this or are we not going to do this? And
That action aspect,
yeah,
right?
I guess
Right.
we're going to
'Cause
do it.
correct
And-
me, grammar people out there, correct me if I'm wrong, but faith, isn't that a verb? At least that's the way I say
Right.
it.
Yeah.
yeah.
And James wasn't invested until he's like, okay, I have to do something.
Now, when you had the power of like taking it through pondering and prayer and self-development and self-awareness and meditation or whatever form it is that gets you to the conclusion of making a decision, when you've gone through that process and you have validation in what you need to be doing, even though it may seem impossible, that's the fallback. You know what I mean? There's so many times I've looked at the story. I've literally, and we'll show some time-lapse videos of me trying to put all this together and team members trying to help us and painting and things. But I remember sitting right there on a bucket and just looking around the store and saying, what am I doing? This is insane.
It is. It's totally.
But there was that confirmation. There was that this has to go forward. This is the next step. Because for me, I started realizing the pain and the suffering of starting a business. Some people describe it as broken glass and swallowing that. The pain and suffering of all of that is a lot less than having to go in and dreaming about something and not doing it.
Yeah.
Because I do believe there will become a time where a great awakening in your life where you'll look back and be like, I wish I would have, and even when we had a situation where we have 3 kids now and the risk of changing paths and careers and spending money the way that we've spent money, it's been a massive risk that's starting to pay off now. And I just really feel like if we don't move forward, if we decide to look backwards and focus on the comforts of life, and if our only goal in life is to be comfortable, well, you're going to be greatly dissatisfied, because it doesn't matter if you achieve that $1 million home or whatever it might be, you're going to be somewhat dissatisfied at some point. You get comfortable in that environment, it changes, it develops, you get sued or whatever it might be. That comfort zone is always designed to move. It's always moved to try to keep you progressing and developing. So you could be well established and still have problems, or you could be under established and still have a lot of problems. And so I don't want to get into these little cliches of like, oh, well, wealth isn't happens and all these different things, or wealth is happiness, or
What do you want to argue?
Yeah, exactly.
I think you're right. I mean, if you there's this quote, I don't know where it came from. It wasn't in my head, I promise, but it basically says there's no growth in the comfort zone, and there's no comfort in the growth zone. And
you can't have both.
Yeah, you can't have
Right.
both. And when my son was talking to me and my wife was kind of on board, I'm like, this is crazy. Because carpe diem, seize the day was always my mantra that I would give my kids, right? And that's be like, you're always gonna regret the things you didn't do more than the things you did do. And they finally say, well, are you full of crap, or do you actually believe that?
Right.
Put
You
his
need
feet
to
to
act.
the fire.
And,
it's
that's a perfect segue that I want to go into right after these quick messages real quick.
Today's sponsor is Temple in Mind. Gazing upon the house of the Lord reminds us of the simple phrase, choose the right. This powerful reminder turns us back to temples time and time again, and gives us the strength to carry on through the best and worst of times. At Temple in Mind, they have something for everyone and every occasion, and they hope you'll be as excited as they are to help light the world with items that truly keep temples in mind. Visit their website today at templeinmind.com. Temple in Mind. Their mission is the name.
All right, welcome back to Zion in Mind podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Johnson, and we were just talking with James Kemp, talking about...
Yeah, just that my son came to me and said, Dad, you've been telling me my whole life that you're going to regret the things you don't do more than the things you do. So are we going to do this or are we not? And I finally, through, like you were saying, introspection and prayer and faith, we were like, all right, let's go do it. And went and took a bunch of savings out of our account and bought a ton of equipment. And it's been an incredible run. And if it goes great. If not, we've learned a ton.
Right.
And we'll never have to look back on our deathbed when we're 90 or whatever and go, man, I wish we would have tried that 3D printing thing.
And I like that point because nothing's wasted. I really believe that. I mean, it may not go the way that you want it to go. We definitely have expectations that we want to hit. And to be truthful, I really have rarely heard of anyone that's actually hit all the expectations of their lives. They always are different, but I definitely believe that nothing's wasted. Even traumatic situations, as I want to be as reverent as I possibly can on the subject, because mental health and there's a lot of subjects that we could go into that I don't want to disregard as small and simple, because they're not. But I do believe that as developing as people in general, nothing's wasted. And so, when we go through these different things that have happened, trauma or whatever in our life, it can, if we choose it to, actually become a very powerful tool that we could use to help others. And that's kind of my goal, is to build a platform that people can share in a respectful way. I don't want to go into all these traumatic situations that people might have experienced, but I definitely want to kind of highlight off of that into what we could move forward and develop. So, Sean, tell me a little bit about more things that with looking inward and from the outside looking inward. How does that relate to putting you on the spot?
I don't answer questions very well.
I just put them on the spot.
I could
Very
jump
wise.
into what James was saying. It's like we all have this, what are we supposed to be doing here, right?
Right.
And when I think about the eternities and stuff, it's like when, I can't take, I went to church every week. That's not going to get me where I want to be. And I keep getting told, you got to start becoming the person that you want to be, not checking off the checklist, not, I did this 3 times, therefore I'm good. And if I have to keep learning, that means, like you guys said, I have to keep going where I don't know what the answer is.
Right.
I need to, and I think you could actually say that we're actually brought to the mortal life to fail.
Yeah.
And that sounds,
Well, we
that
fail
will
as
never,
often
that
as
will
we
never
can.
come
My
over.
wife and I talk about it all the time. Everything that we're facing is impossible.
Right.
I don't care who you are.
I guess it's the same thing. Yeah.
I really don't care who you are. Everything that you're facing is impossible. We were
Right.
just talking about this before the podcast started. That just the miracle of life
Right.
and the steps that my sister, who's a nurse and she's working on her doctorate right now, she just kind of went through this process with me when we had our child. My wife and I had our last child. She goes, Aaron, do you realize how many miracles need to happen in order for your wife to pull through this and your baby to be healthy?
So that miracle of birth is not one thing.
No,
It's
no.
thousands of things
But
that
it's
have to line
impossible.
up.
It
Correct.
really is
Right.
impossible, but it
Right.
happens, right? And so I don't want to be reckless people. I don't want to say that we can fly and jump off bridges and things will be fine and we'll
I have a
able-
joke about that.
uh-oh.
No, I'm not telling it. That.
Okay. But I-
you got
It's
us
not
intrigued.
appropriate.
Right. I mean, there is a fine line between being a reckless person and a fanatic and saying that, I'm not going to go get a job because everything's going to be provided
Right.
for me and
Right.
I'm going to faith it. And that's something that we say in our home a lot, faith it. Faith is nothing without action.
Yeah.
Like you've got to move. That's kind of back to what you were saying. You have to push through. You have to act. You have to sacrifice.
Right.
I mean, we've got sacrifice and the elements we all have sacrifice to make this project happen. We're sacrificing our mornings. We're sacrificing our times and efforts. I remember when we opened the doors for the grand opening, there was no product. And all of a sudden Sean rolls in with like 100 plaques or something like that.
No.
Oh,
that's not
it
what
felt
happened.
like 100 plaques.
No.
I'm telling you, it was a huge
brought in
amount of work
17
over 2
months.
months.
Yeah.
And just dumping that in. And then, oh my goodness, I keep wanting to call you Sean. James.
It's all right.
I do this. I switch these two all the time. I'm so sorry,
Sean's
James.
a good guy. I'm okay with his name.
James is, the new designs that are coming with the temple. All I'm trying to say is to our listeners and our viewers is that if there's a challenge that you're facing in your life, everyone's going to have some sort of a challenge and you have two choices to make. You can treat it as being a victim, which I think is an important part in the healing process. There is that take it on and understanding, hey, I have been affected. I'm not saying disregard that. That's a very important part of the stages of grieving. And so taking on, hey, I was offended or this happened or I have this element and, out of my control, right? Because that's usually what it is. It's mostly out of my control. Where I really want to focus is that part, like you said. Would you mind repeating that again, that we're not comfortable in our growth?
Yeah. So there's no comfort in the growth zone, and there's no growth in the comfort zone.
I think the parts that are really most exciting about our life is that development from being in the lowest of lows to becoming into the highs of the highs.
Mhm.
Not in the highs of the highs and not in the lows of the lows.
It's
Not
the
being
process.
depressed and in the dark and in the
In the
gloom and in the
process.
ditch. It's the process of coming out.
Mhm.
That's the process of repentance. That's a process of asking for forgiveness. That's a process of becoming humble and internally looking at your life and what's happened. I've offended a lot of people. I'm not going to lie.
Just this morning.
Just
yeah.
this morning driving in here, I'm sure I've gotten 3 or 4. Never mind. But I definitely feel that it's more like, what am I trying to do moving forward to reconcile that?
Right.
What am I
If
trying
I
to?
could jump in. So
Yeah.
we've talked about, you have the highs of the highs and the lows of the lows. I think when you start bringing in that there's a being that's overlooking things, there's a God, there's someone that wants you to move forward, you start looking at things a little bit differently. So,
Right.
there
has to be some.
there's
higher
things
power.
that can take. I remember very, very vividly trying to get to the temple when I was just starting to go back to church, and work was just not a good day. It was not a good day. And to walk out of all the stress and all the responsibilities that were falling apart at work and to get into the temple and have a different view.
Mhm.
So, and it's almost, to use a media term, to spin it correctly, to
Mhm.
spin it differently, spin it correctly. That was a molehill. It was not a mountain. It was a molehill. So when we're looking at, oh, wow, this has happened to me. And I've sat down with people and talked to them, and it's like, you do not understand the opportunities that are
Right.
just right here. You're looking at it one way.
We'd use the analogy of the hole. That was
And I
fantastic. We
see-
talked about that, where people fall into that hole.
Oh yeah,
This is fantastic. You remember?
yeah. You're
always-
going to make me try to be eloquent, and that's
That's
will never happen.
That's quite the build up there, Sean. We're
whole
expecting a
thing,
No,
payoff
this
here,
is
Ryan.
this is really good.
No, but we do get into situations where we basically dig ourselves a hole. So this is
Uh-huh.
corporate
or
hole.
other people sometimes
Right.
do it.
Right.
for us.
Either way. So
Right.
you're in a hole and you don't see that there are options.
Because you're in it.
Because you're right there. And you can't, I'm building my creations that I'm building, and then I take it to my wife, and she says, that's stupid. It's like, well, I have to step back and get another view on it.
Right.
And if you don't have someone else to say, you're only looking at these three things. You're not looking at the huge picture and the opportunities.
And that's fantastic what you're talking about with temples. And I just want to talk in nature. I mean, obviously in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we have many temples across the world, but temples are not a new thing. They're not.
Right.
They've been part of different religious elements all over the world. They still are. The whole point of a temple. When you look up
temple in the dictionary, it talks about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
That's interesting. That's interesting because it's in the forefront right now.
Yeah.
But potentially, right? My point is that having a place set aside for higher levels of meditation or higher levels of learning and teaching, or at least saying, hey, I'm going to declare this area as something much, much more worthy for my goals and trying to strive for something better. And what are those things that we're striving for? Family organization, pulling us together, repentance, forgiveness, trying to live laws of sacrifice. I mean, it is a higher law. And so
it's interesting that those are simple.
Very simple.
Laws.
Well, they're simple, but they're hard to execute.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
But they're very simple.
They're very simple.
And that's the thing I miss the most. I mean, don't get me wrong. When you go to the temple, you're serving others, you're doing their work, that kind of a thing. But the part I miss the most is sitting in those special rooms and like you said, Sean, just kind of evaluating things and saying, first of all, that it's not that big of a deal.
Right, when you have a perspective on it.
And it's like, it's all right.
And the science behind that of giving your brain a rest and pulling back, like you said, Sean, and being able to look internally, that is pulling yourself out of that hole and just looking inward. And a lot of that's why revelation and comes from meditation, because if you're doing meditation correctly, or if you're worshiping or you're studying in a way that's at a higher level, or you're trying to make it at a higher level, you're able to step back and see yourself in the situation, and then you're able to start seeing the things that are fueling that.
Well, I think
or driving that.
I'm going to keep arguing with you just a little bit. But you do step back and you allow somebody else to help you see it differently.
That's very good.
You allow your mind and your body to be taught.
Yep. Absolutely. And that's really important, because I think that we get so close to our hand here that we can't see our fingers, as they say, right? And for us to step back and look, especially now, especially when we are just crammed down our throats that your neighbor's not good, or you make sure that you separate yourself. And I'm not an anti-masker. I'm not an anti-vaccinator. I'm not going to even go into all that stuff. I know I totally...
You brought it up now.
I brought it up, but
no,
I think that's a rabbit hole that we could open up that's not for this particular format. I think this format is designed to say, hey, these are the situations that we're in. We already know what those are. We don't need those regurgitated over and over again. What are we going to do to solve that? And the only answer that I can come up with is that we elevate ourselves to a higher plane. We look at our neighbor and we don't see them as the plague. We don't look at our neighbor and see the color. We don't look at our neighbor and think of any other attribute other than that everyone is suffering. And I heard this the other day, and I wish I had the quote. Maybe we can find it a little bit later. But when you look at everyone, do you really believe that they're trying to do a bad job? I mean, when you're sitting there driving down the freeway and people are cutting you off or whatever it might be, do you really think that somebody woke up in the morning and said, hey, I'm going to cut this guy off and I'm going to be a complete jerk? Or we think that.
And we think that they're after me.
Exactly. We think, man, that guy intentionally picked me out.
This guy has followed me
exactly
from the very start. He's purposely trying to
It does escalate, and then it becomes personal.
Yeah.
But you never know. You never know. That guy could be, on his
There's
last
time to let people through.
And that guy could have been on his last warning for being late for work, and his car didn't start this morning.
Or he could be just a
There's
jerk.
always
Either
a
way,
reason.
it doesn't matter to me.
But there's always
sometimes
a reason.
it's fun to get mad. No, I'm just kidding.
It totally is. Yeah.
Sometimes you're like, that guy really was a jerk.
So I have a little story. It's probably stupid, but
here we go.
I had a gentleman who just kept. So I was a bishop for a while, and he would tell me how dumb I was. Well, I thought you were this, and you're not this, and you're not this, and you're not this. And it's just like, but when I moved into
the expectation of the leader being something more than it was,
and he was a leader when I was trying to get back to church, and so it kind of hurt. And I had these bad feelings. I'm trying to figure out how to do them and stuff. And I'm driving. This is why it makes, and I'm driving and I realize that each person in each one of these cars is a son or daughter of God. Therefore, they have value all by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And all I need to do is step back and say, that person has value. Our Father in heaven loves that person so much.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm not going to argue with God on that one. If he's a good guy, then he's a good guy. And I was able to just like, that's not a thing
and
anymore. Obviously, it's a thing because I keep telling that story.
And everyone's on the tip of crisis. I mean, honestly, like you look at the statistic of how many families are living paycheck to paycheck and right now having to live on subsidies or whatever it might be to be able to get by. We are becoming more and more fragile in our life and situation. Hence the reason why having some form of meditation or outside reflection, looking in or getting into a new
different perspective.
Yeah, exactly. A different perspective.
Yeah, it's those
is
quiet
more
lives
critical.
of desperation.
Right.
Everyone is living a quiet life of desperation in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
Some of us are better at hiding it than others.
He's telling me 1 minute.
No, he has a question. I'm sure.
Oh, do you have a question? Is that what it was? Or was that 1 minute?
No, I'm sure it was a question.
So sorry, keep going.
Well, I was just saying that everybody, no matter who you are, is living a life of quiet desperation. Sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's emotional, sometimes it's
relationship.
Family. Yeah. And some of us are better at hiding it than others.
Yes.
But we're all dealing with crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have
Are you going to
challenges.
be the person that triggers that crisis, or are you going to be the person that actually contributes to helping that crisis?
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to, and that's the purpose of this. This is called Temple in Mind. We're in a situation where we really believe that what you think is what you get. Temple is a very holy word to me. Temple reference our body, our soul, our mind, our spirit, a place of worship. It represents a safe place to come to reflect. That's really what this is about. And that's what the point of this store is if you notice there's a couch here, there's my desk. It's not a traditional retail store. This is just a byproduct. Mm-hmm. Selling something is a byproduct. My whole goal, this is a necessary evil. My whole goal is actually to bring people in and have communication with them and find what it is that's their temple or what their crisis is. And I don't want to be the person that's tipping them in the wrong direction. I want to encourage them to come in the right direction. And so that comes to a wrap for our podcast this time. We're very grateful for everyone that's listening. Again, this is Zion in Mind. I am your host, Aaron Johnson.
James Kemp.
And Sean Wilson.
Thanks for joining us, and tune in next time. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
This podcast has been brought to you by Genesis 3D, W.K. Wilson, and Temple in Mind. Thank you for listening.